United States. What happens there also could have an impact on the entire world. The U.S. Federal Reserve has announced another interest hike.
Investors' concerns that the global economy could fall into recession as the Fed and other central banks raise interest rates in an effort to stop inflation.
Russia's gas cuts will hurt businesses. European economies could plunge into recession.
It will naturally have an impact on our macroeconomic fundamentals as well as it is having on other countries.
World economy is speeding towards a cliff edge. Stocks are down, inflation is up, and investors are moody. Everyone is wondering the same thing. Are we heading into a recession?
As central banks across the world hike interest rates simultaneously, the world may be edging toward the global recession within 2023 itself, and the string of financial crises in emerging markets and developing economies that would do them last harming, according to the comparison new study by World Bank and according to some financial experts across the globe. Central banks around the world have been rising interest rates this year with a degree of synchronicity not seen over the last 5 decades, a trend that is likely to continue well into next year. According to reports, yet the currently expected trajectory of interest rate increase and another policy action may not be sufficient to bring global recession to a level before the pandemic. Investors accept central bank to raise global monetary policy rate to almost 4% through 2023, an increase of more than 2%. The inflation rate around the world is already high. Pakistan is almost at 27.3%, where USA is at about 8%, Germany is almost 10%, India is almost 7%, and United Kingdom is more than 10%. Unless supply disruption and labor market pressure subsides, those interest rate increase could have the global core inflation rate excluding energy at about 5% in 2023, nearly double the 5-year average before the pandemic. To cut global inflation to a rate consistent within their targets, central bank may need to raise interest rate by additional 2 percentage points. Several historical indicators of global recession are already flashing warning. The global economy is now its steepest slowdown since 1970. The world's largest 3 economies, USA, China, European Union, have been slowing sharply. Even the moderate hit to the global economy over the next year could tip into the recession. The study relies on insight of previous global recession to analyze the recent evolution of economic activity and present scenario for 2022 to 2024. A slowdown such that one underway typical call for counter-cyclical policy to support activity. However, the threat of inflation and inflated fiscal space are spurring policymakers in many countries to withdraw policy support even as the global economy slows sharply. The experience of 1970, the policy response to the 1975 global recession, the subsequent period of stagflation, and the global recession of 1982 illustrate the risk of allowing inflation to remain elevated for long while growth is weak. The 1982 global recession coincided with the second slowest growth retained developing economies over the first 5 decades. Second only to 2022, it triggered more than 40 debt crises and was followed by a decade of lowest growth in many developing economies. Ayan Khose, the World Bank acting vice president, said, "Recent tightening of monetary policy and fiscal policy will likely to prove helpful in reducing inflation for equitable growth, finance and institutions. But because in emerging markets, the developing economies need to stand ready to manage the potential spillover from the globally synchronous tightening of policy, they are highly synchronous across countries. They could mutually compounding in tightening fiscal conditions and steeping the global growth slowdown. Central banks should persist in their effort to control inflation, and it can be done without touching a global recession, but it will require construction action by verify of policymakers. Central bank must communicate policy decisions clearly while safeguarding their independence. This could help anchor inflation expectation and reduce the degree of tightening needed. In advanced economies, central banks should keep in mind the cross-border spillover effect of monetary tightening. In emerging market and developing economies, they should strengthen macroprudential regulation and build foreign exchange reserves. Fiscal authorities will need carefully calibrate the withdrawal of fiscal support measures while ensuring consistency with monetary policy objectives. The fraction of countries tightening fiscal policy next year is expected to reach its highest level since the early 1990s. This could amplify the effect of monetary policy growth. Policymakers should also put in place calibrate medium-term fiscal plans to provide target relief to vulnerable households. Other economic policymakers will need to join fight against the inflation, particularly by taking strong steps to boost global supply. These include Easing labor market constraints. Policy measures need to help increase labor force participation and reduce price pressures. Labor market policies can facilitate the reallocation of displaced workers. Boosting the global supply of commodities. Global coordination can go on a long way in increasing the food and energy supply. For energy commodities, policymakers should accelerate the transition in low carbon energy sources and introduce measures to reduce energy consumption. Strengthening global trade networks. Policymakers should cooperate to alleviate global supply bottlenecks. They should support a rule-based international economic order, one that guards against the threat of protectionism and fragmentation that could further disrupt the trade networks.